Greetings all, Ferrari-Man 601 here. Welcome back to another 1/400 scale diecast model aircraft review of these two models, coming to us from JC Wings and NG Next Generation models, the Airbus Beluga XL. Now, of course, the official designation for this is the Airbus A330-743L. However, it is colloquially known and even somewhat officially known as the Beluga, and it is the second in a series of outsized cargo transport aircraft specifically designed by Airbus for Airbus. These airplanes, they're used in the manufacture of airplanes. Airbus, being a multinational consortium, they are based in several different countries, and of course they are therefore based in several different areas of Europe, which means that when it comes time to assemble a complete aircraft, components have to come from far and wide. Airplanes are only getting bigger these days, but in getting bigger they're also trying to get more efficient. This means that wings in particular are getting larger, they're getting wider, and they're getting longer. And they're also being made out of all sorts of highly sophisticated composite materials that, unlike their aluminum and steel cousins of yesteryear, they can't exactly be broken down into smaller components for transport. This means that they have to be transported essentially intact, which means that you have a very large and irregularly shaped object that needs to go across the continents. Enter the Beluga, the big bulbous blister section of the upper fuselage on this airplane that is specifically designed to carry wing components, fuselage components, and other outsized cargo that simply won't fit inside a shipping container and therefore won't fit on a smaller or more conventional type of aircraft. Therefore, Airbus decided to repurpose the A330 a little bit and also take some design cues from their previous line of Beluga aircraft that we'll touch on a little bit later on and create this, the Beluga XL. Here from JC Wings and from NG, we get two renditions of actually the exact same airplane, same registration on both of these models. Let's take a look at what Airbus have done here with the A330-743L, and in turn what JC Wings and NG have done with their renditions thereof. Before we take a closer look at these two models, let's take a look at the boxes in which they come. First off, the box for the NG aircraft coming in from screen right. Here we go. NG, they do a nice job with their box art, I will say, and that is absolutely still the general rule here with the Beluga XL. Front and center, there's a rendering of the model, slightly smaller than the model itself, but accurate in terms of the details that you get on the model, obviously with gear retracted, of course. There's the fleet number 3 there, and then Airbus Beluga XL in the upper right. Bottom of the front panel, Airbus, the registration there, Foxtrot Golf X-Ray, Lima, India, NG Next Generation Model, 1/400 scale, collectible models, diecast metal. Cool. Bottom panel of the box, status quo for NG, Beluga XL up there, NG logo in the bottom left, and then a smaller rendering of the aircraft with the registration reiterated. The right side panel here, this is an inventory number from the distributor, but Airbus underneath that, of course, NG Next Generation Model, and then 1/400 scale collectible models, diecast metal. Top panel, basically the same as the bottom panel there, just reiterating everything that we already saw, and then the left side without the inventory number, Airbus, and then of course all of that. Nice colors on the box as well. Obviously they're playing on that XL branding on the aircraft, and it works very nicely. On the back of the box, we have got basically a reiteration of the front panel with the additions of the social media and corporate website links for NG, item numbers, and then of course all of our legal warnings in terms of choking hazard, 14 plus for the ages, and all of that stuff. And then that's about it here for the NG box. A little bit different from some of the other manufacturers out there in that they don't do a write-up about the aircraft on their boxes, but they make up for it with some very nice box art. And now the box for the JC Wings aircraft, and this one is quite different in that we don't have any sort of tabs to open, but it's clear. Yeah, we don't have an actual lid on this thing. This is just a clear plastic film, so you'll be able to see the model inside of it at all times. But very similar otherwise to the NG box, because it's the same aircraft after all. Airbus Beluga XL in the upper left. The void where the aircraft normally would be. 1/400 scale diecast aircraft model is how JC Wings brand everything. Bottom panel, Airbus Beluga XL, and then our barcode there with, I guess, a stock number from JC Wings. On the right side of the box, basically nothing to look at, but just some nice coloration there, and the branding Airbus Beluga XL top panel. There we go, with a little bit more of those nice blue stripes, and then Airbus A330-743L, which is the actual designation for this aircraft type. Left side panel, here you go with all of your legalese and warnings and things like that. Not suitable for children under 14 years, it says in German as well as in French. Interesting, made in China there. Sad Onion 0 to 14 and the recycle things. JC Wings logo here on the right side of that left panel. And then the back of the box. Here's where we get a little bit of information about the model itself, but still not all that much. Overall dimensions here, length and height. The length is 63.1 meters and the height is 18.9 meters. And then over top here in this top-down view, we get a wingspan of 60.3 meters. So the length is almost identical to the wingspan. Interesting. Airbus A330-743L specifications. Manufacturer is Airbus. Overall length 63.1 meters, wingspan 60.3 meters, height 18.9 meters. Number of engines 2, and the engine type is the Rolls-Royce Trent 700 series. And then, of course, the bottom left of this, the JC Wings logo. So the boxes, neither one of them really giving us all that much information about the aircraft themselves, but they do look nice, and of course they serve the function of, well, shielding these things from the elements for transport and for storage. That's really what a box is supposed to do, and they do it quite well. However, technical specifications, to get more specific on them, we can do that ourselves. First off, the obvious. These airplanes look really strange. Why were they built? Well, ever since airplanes have been things, there has been a need to put things on them. Right? It's no good if you can just have an aircraft that flies around by itself and can't actually do anything useful. It kind of defeats the purpose. Well, sometimes it's required to put big things on airplanes, and sometimes the big things are bigger than the airplanes themselves, such as was the case with the design and development of the Beluga series. These are not the first two Belugas to exist. The honor for that goes to the A300-600ST Super Transporter, the original Beluga. However, the XL has superseded that former type. But getting back to the rationale of this thing, Airbus is an aircraft manufacturer. Therefore, they need to transport things related to the design and manufacture of aircraft. Sometimes those components, particularly the newer components where we're using materials such as carbon composites, things that can't readily be broken down into smaller parts post-production for transport. Now all of a sudden, we've got big things that we're not necessarily manufacturing in the same place as final assembly, and therefore we have to move them from one place to another. Enter the Beluga. The Beluga XL, as the designation A330-743L may belie, is a build-up, basically a development of the Airbus A330. The A330, of course, is a twin-engine, long-haul passenger airliner. However, the A330 by itself, it's not really good at being a cargo aircraft. Yes, there are cargo variants of the A330, and they are used in the commercial sector, but they're useful for hauling containers, things like that. Containers that are designed specifically to be in the cargo holds of airplanes, and they're designed with the space and weight distribution and all things like that. All of those considerations are already built into that design. However, if you want to transport something really big and irregularly shaped and irregularly sized, say something like the whole front section of an A330 fuselage, or a wing segment for an A380 or for an A350, something like that. These are really big single components that are not really practical to disassemble for transport. You need something like this. What Airbus did was take 5 of their A330-200 freighters, and they basically chopped the tops off of them, and they built this rather large bulbous upper fuselage for them, and that serves as a cargo bay for carrying all sorts of oversized cargo, and predominantly Airbus is using these aircraft to transport large single-piece components for other airplanes, such as parts for the A350 or parts for other airliners, but really big things like wing segments that just can't be broken down so that they can fit into containers that go into smaller aircraft, more conventional aircraft. No. Basically, they can take a whole fuselage segment or a whole wing segment and just stick it into the fuselage of this aircraft, and, well, they'll take it to wherever it needs to go, from its point of manufacture to its place of assembly as a final completed aircraft. And that's exactly what Airbus do with these aircraft today. Overall specifications, therefore, on the A330-743L, as it technically is known, they read a little bit like this. Generally, what are we talking about? Well, we have got a cargo aircraft with a 50,500 kilogram or 111,333 pound payload capacity. Overall width, as the JC Wings box told us, is 63.1 meters, that's 207 feet exactly. The wingspan is 60.3 meters, that's 197 feet 10 inches. The height is 18.9 meters, or 62 feet exactly, and that's measuring from the bottom of the main gear to the top of the vertical stabilizer there in the empennage. Overall wing area is 361.6 square meters, or 3,892 square feet, and the wing aspect ratio is 10.1. The empty weight on the aircraft, so this is no fuel and no payload, is 127,500 kilograms. That's 281,089 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight, though, is 227,000 kilograms. That's 500,449 pounds. Overall fuel capacity is 73,000 kilograms, or 161,000 pounds. And the fuselage diameter, this is really where it distinguishes itself from its A330 cousin. Fuselage diameter is 8.8 meters, or 29 feet. So yes, we have got ourselves quite a big bird here. The cargo hold has a total volume of 2,209 cubic meters, or 78,000 cubic feet. The power plant, as the JC Wings box also told us, we have two Rolls-Royce Trent 700 series turbofan engines. They produce 316 kilonewtons, or 71,000 pound-feet of thrust each at sea level. All of these specifications combine to give the following performance characteristics. The cruise speed is 737 kilometers per hour. That is 458 miles per hour, or 398 knots. That is Mach 0.69 at flight level 350. So 35,000 feet, you are doing 69% the speed of sound. That is a bit slower than most airliners you see today. Most airliners, when they're at 35,000 feet or even higher, the service ceiling also diminished here on the Beluga XL, they'll be doing Mach 0.8, Mach 0.85, even close to Mach 0.9 in a lot of cases nowadays. But no, just 0.69 Mach there at 350. So you really do sacrifice some performance characteristics, even over the standard A330, by building that big, voluminous, bulbous fuselage there. You're adding a lot of drag, you're adding a lot of topside weight to the aircraft as well, so these are negatively impacting the performance characteristics, but the trade-off is you get a whole lot more cargo capacity. Service ceiling on the aircraft, by the way, is 35,000 feet, so that is top altitude and top speed for the aircraft, 0.69 Mach at 350. So you've lost some performance over its A330 origins, but you have gained that huge cargo volume, which of course is the actual reason why this aircraft exists. We're not trying to move people efficiently, we're trying to move big things efficiently, and that is what this aircraft does best. Now, taking a little bit of a closer look at the models themselves for the sake of their being models. Well, obviously we've got two of these here, one by JC Wings and one by NG. They are absolutely identical in specification. They are the same aircraft through and through. There is no difference between these two. In fact, they both share the same registration, Foxtrot Golf X-Ray Lima India. So they are the same aircraft. They are both Beluga number 3. And, well, they're representing exactly the same physical prototype archetype in the real world. Therefore, we do have a bit of an opportunity here to compare manufacturers. They are the only examples of two identical aircraft made by different companies that I've got in the collection. Therefore, we've got the chance to take a look at what JC Wings do, what NG do, what are some strengths, what are some weaknesses, and really, how can you tell these things apart, in all honesty, because there are very few distinguishing characteristics between them visually. There are some others that we will get into later on. Predominantly, the JC Wings aircraft, it is, in my opinion, the better of the two, and we'll talk about why, but if you want to tell them apart, you see these two stripes here across that fin leading into the vertical stabilizer. Those are absent on the NG version as that one comes along here. Take a look at the little fin there. You can see it is just blank white versus the JC Wings version has these two silver stripes that come across the top side of it. So that is how you can distinguish these two models apart, just visually. Quick reference. There are some other distinguishing characteristics, but we can't quite see them yet. Although, I do have to say that both of them do a very good job of portraying the aircraft in question, the NG one going by here. There are a few little quirks and features I will talk about, though, with the NG one that does knock it down a peg in terms of which one is better, in my opinion. But both of them do a nice job. Obviously, their molds are very good, the shapes are correct, the paint is absolutely fantastic on both of these. Obviously, the JC Wings has some slightly different paint work across the empennage area, but aside from that, we have got two very competently produced, very nice examples of the A330-743L right here. And again, in terms of overall quality, I don't think that you'd be left wanting if you had either or, but certainly to have both of them, it is a little bit of an opportunity just to take a look at, my opinion, NG. They are really moving up there in terms of perhaps being the best in the business in the 1/400 scale category. And what can JC Wings do in comparison to them? Well, they've sort of upstaged them a little bit here, and it's interesting. But really, macrocosmically, both of these, it's very difficult to distinguish these two in terms of quality, but again, you're not going to go wrong with either. However, there are some things about these two that do warrant a little bit of a closer look, and we shall do that presently. Right, so we have stopped the rotation here, and the NG aircraft is nearest to us. And why have we done this? Well, I just want to demonstrate something to you real quickly. Take a close look at the nose gear on this aircraft here, and does anything about it seem a little strange to you? Well, it might be a little bit difficult to tell because of the shadows and the white-on-white contrast here. But that nose gear is not on the ground, folks, and it's not because it's too short. It's not on the ground because we have a little bit of a weight balance issue with this airplane. And this is the first one in my collection that I've had that does this. I've heard this as a common complaint from other 1/400 models, but this is the first time that I've personally observed it. Take a look, though. You can see a little downward pressure and the nose comes down. If I let it go, the nose pops back up. Obviously, this is something that if you wanted to have this on display, you could easily remedy this with a little bit of double-sided tape or tack or anything like that. But just here on a turntable, smooth, it's a non-porous surface, nothing for it to grab into, it's just gonna pop back up like that. It's a really minor thing, but it does show you that there is a weight balance issue with this aircraft. Obviously, we need a little bit more weight forward, and they probably could have done that to segue into what we're talking about next, is make this out of metal. You see the hatch here. Make that out of metal, please, and then obviously that problem will be allayed. But they didn't do that, and therefore we have got a whole bunch of mass concentration toward the tail, and it, this is the side effect. Very minor, but the JC Wings aircraft doesn't do that, so you lose, NG. You lost out on that one. It's a really minor thing, and it feels silly to point it out, but it is an attribute of the model, and technically speaking, it's a flaw of the model, so that's what it is, and yeah, it does bear mention. Now looking at the JC Wings aircraft, and you can see, first of all, yeah, This thing is on the ground and it's not going anywhere. The weight distribution is clearly over the nose where it belongs because, well, we're not pitching up here on the ground. We're not facing into a crazy headwind, apparently. However, the reason why the JC Wings aircraft, as far as I can tell, does not do this, whereas the NG does, well, it's got to do with the other features that this aircraft has that the NG lacks. I mentioned that this section of the fuselage, this forward hatch, they ought to have made that out of metal on the NG model because you probably would have fixed that pitch-up situation on the ground. JC Wings have done that, and they have done that for good reason. Because if we just strategically use our appendages here, yeah, have a look, it's removable. And now, of course, the thing pitches up on the ground. However, this is removable. This is the front hatch here, and it is in metal, and I can tell why they've done it in metal because the thing is pitching up now on the ground with it removed. I'm not going to call that a flaw because, well, clearly, if you put this back into a condition it's likely to be displayed in, it now sits back down. NG did not do that, and nor did they make this hatch removable. So clearly you can see the reason. Otherwise, these are most likely more or less exactly the same molds or very, very close to the same molds. However, now that we do have this opened up, you can take a look and see inside a little bit. And yeah, there's really no detail in there. There is a bit of detail if we want to move toward the nose section there, but there's not a whole lot to see inside. It's just unpainted. There's a little bit of overspray in there, but there is a little bit of patterning that is visible above the cabin area. And if we can just sort of pitch down a little bit, perhaps we will take a look at that. Yeah, we'll see it later on, but there is a little bit of decal work in here to show a little bit of a floor pattern, but it's there, and it's an interesting touch. And again, NG, they did not do that, and JC Wings obviously did do that, and quite clearly you can see the consequences thereof. We reinstall the hatch, and now the airplane sits straight and level on the ground, as it should. So there's the problem, and there's the solution. Interesting. The other thing that the JC Wings aircraft does, therefore, is once you do remove this front hatch, you will have a way to replace it. So this is all in plastic, so this pitch-up problem is not necessarily going to be solved hereby, but this is the hatch in its open configuration. So closed, it would be more or less in this orientation here, and then open is going to flip up by about 90 degrees. These little pans go into the holes that we saw in the fuselage area, and then if we install them, they just go into little slots. You can see that now we've got ourselves an open hatch, and the pitch-up problem actually is kind of solved by that. Even though that plastic open hatch is quite light, it must be the weight distribution being pushed farther forward that solves that problem once again. So physics work open and closed, but they don't work in the in-between state. That's totally reasonable to me, because you're not going to be displaying this thing authentically anyway if you've got the hatch just altogether missing. So, yep, we can, in my book, we can basically pardon them for that little fault. But again, I like that, and that's really a feature that the NG model just doesn't have. There's no way around it. The JC Wings wins. It's not all doom and gloom, though, for the NG. Obviously, the JC Wings aircraft is getting a little bit eager behind us. Yep, doesn't want to sit back down. That's okay. However, the NG, what it lacks in terms of the interactive features, it gives back, in some regard, with the details that we see. Now, NG always do a great job on their models, and this one really is no exception. It's just that they got outshone in this particular circumstance. However, what they have given us is quite nice, I must say. First off, here we go on the nose of the aircraft, and you'll notice that the forward section of the fuselage is drooped down relative to the rest of the aircraft. And why is that? Well, they've done that because they need to make sure that they can get that perfectly flat floor in the cargo hold of this airplane. And, well, in the A330, in its passenger variants, the floor does not sit straight and level because the airplane does not sit straight and level when it's on the ground. There is a little bit of a pitch down to the nose. Therefore, in designing the Beluga as well as in designing the freight variants of the A330, Airbus needed to revise the landing gear. They solved the problem on the A330 freighters by adding a blister to the nose landing gear doors, and they did that because they had to extend the shock absorber on that nose landing gear so that it would be extended a bit more fully when the aircraft is on the ground and not under load, so that it would settle to be perfectly level. Because obviously if you're going to be doing your weight balance calculations for big pieces of cargo, you need to make sure that you're dealing with a stable platform so you know how to restrain things, because cargo comes loose in flight, you've got a problem. However, in terms of the Beluga project, they decided to push the whole nose of the airplane down a little bit. So obviously we get this extension of the forward fuselage down toward the ground. It makes it look a little strange, but it's effective. Effectively, it does the same thing that the landing gear extension did on the A330 freighter without having to extend the landing gear here. So this is straight up stock A330 landing gear, at least for the nose gear, and therefore by lowering the fuselage height, we can bring the nose down to be straight and level. Cool. One thing I will dock NG for, though, is have a look at this shut line. Clearly, this is a separate piece from the rest of the fuselage, and if this hatch is not removable, why is the shut line so big? Clearly, it was installed and then permanently bonded together. Would it have been possible just to make everything one big piece? Maybe. But it probably was going to be cost prohibitive, especially when obviously they are using the same mold as the JC wings more or less. So I can understand why it was done. It was a cost-cutting measure, but if this is not a removable component, it looks like it should be. That's a problem in my book. Very uncharacteristic of NG to be doing things like that, I must say. But the rest of the details, they're pretty good. Obviously, along the nose here, we have got our cockpit windows, and we have got some air data ports and static ports around here for ground servicing and things like that. So that's all good. Additionally, you can see we've got a big eye on the aircraft, and the name Beluga, obviously, it's alluding to a whale. And you can see the overall proportion of the upper section of fuselage. It looks a bit like a whale, so they called it Beluga, and, well, there's your whale eye, and there's your whale chin, I guess. I suppose they were going for this abstract smiling whale face. It kind of works. I'm not going to say it doesn't work at all. It's a little bit esoteric, but it works. Therefore, I'm not going to complain about Airbus's livery choices. But yes, anyway, more conventional things here. Here's our wing, of course, with our starboard engine nacelle. You can see the little fins here for your thrust reversers. That all looks good. They, of course, would all pop out rearward when the thrust reverse is engaged on landing. And that all looks very, very nice. Other details on the engine nacelles as well. Manual service ports and valves and things like that. So all that's good. Wing leading edge, I like all of that. Nice leading edge slat detail visible there. And of course our end fence, very small end fence, especially when compared to something like the A350 or the A380, but it's there and it does the same job. And of course we have got our green nav light here on the starboard side. Looks good. Moving rearward, as if we didn't have enough cargo space on this airplane, we have the same rear cargo door that you'd get on the A330 airliner variant, so all that's good, as well as our registration, Foxtrot Golf X-Ray Lima, India. Very, very nice. Some more differences between this and its airliner cousin. Well, yeah, big differences here. First of all, you have got the empennage, which on the face of it doesn't look all that radical, but yes, you've got this shark fin, or fairing, whatever you want to call it, that is linking up to the top section of the fuselage through the cargo hold section, and then it links up to the vertical stabilizer proper right there. It is flanked by the horizontal stabilizers, which are in their conventional positions, but they are flanked by these big end fences. And what they're there is they're not control surfaces. They just have basically the same sort of rationale as the end fences on the main wings. They're there to clean up the airflow and minimize vortices that may form because you've got this big center section of fuselage here generating a lot of turbulence and a lot of drag. So they're trying to clean up some of that so that it doesn't keep attaching itself to the airplane and causing yet more drag. So basically it's the same sort of rationale as you got on the Antonov 225, as you got on the shuttle carrier aircraft, the 747 that NASA used to carry the space shuttle with the split tail empennage. Same idea here. You've got a big thing down front and center. You want to try and minimize the turbulence that it's creating. So very nice. Moving back toward midships, see our landing gear there. We've got double bogies on the main gear. All of that looks nice. And decent detail as well on the linkage there, the pylons that are attaching the engines to the bottom of the wing structure. Very, very cool. Additionally, you got your antennas across the top of the fuselage. We got 3 of them there. And we also have 1 ventral antenna down there. In addition to the other big change on the empennage, we have got these ventral strakes underneath. There's another one on the other side as well. So some differences, some similarities, and all in all, one very interestingly proportioned airplane. From the rear of the NG Beluga, of course, you've got your vertical stabilizer running up there. That all looks fairly conventional from the rear, and then, of course, your horizontal stabilizers here. Yep, they're very unconventional, again, with those big end fences above and slightly below the wing as well. However, things do become a bit more conventional here. Your auxiliary power unit exhaust right there in its traditional location. We'd expect to see that there, so that's nice. You can see our area of deflection for the elevator trim. That's all good. Service door for the auxiliary power unit, I believe, and then you can see both now ventral fins there just below the tail cone, which itself has been extended a bit as an aerodynamic appendage there. The auxiliary power unit and the hydraulic machinery there needed for the vertical and horizontal stabilizers, not really any different, I'm led to believe, from the standard A330, but they've extended that aerodynamically. So that works. In addition, we have got ourselves the engine exhaust sides. You can see a little bit, believe it or not, of a pass-through visible there here on the NG aircraft in terms of being able to look out of the front of the engine. That all looks well and good, and it's a rarity to see that on engines of this type. However, it's there. Very, very cool. And by engines of this type, I mean of this size in a 1/400 scale. Obviously, there is bypass in engines of this type in the real world. Looking at the JC Wings aircraft, that's not quite as apparent here, at least not from the front, and, well, yeah. Does it want to stay on the ground? No, it does not. It still doesn't want to cooperate with us. But again, we've already pardoned it for all of that. While we are taking a look at the front end of the JC Wings aircraft, though, we get a very good sense of what the front end of the NG aircraft looks like, therefore. So we'll get our forward hatch reinstalled here for the time being, and yeah, now we can keep it on the ground and get a sense of the nose. There we are. We mentioned that the nose would be drooping down here, and that, again, is to maintain a level floor in the cargo hold. And it works well for that purpose, and it gives this very odd appearance otherwise, but it's there for a reason, and it does the job nicely. Other details there, virtually identical to the NG version. You can see that little brow line there in black surrounding the cockpit windows, so it's a little bit difficult to see the actual cockpit windows, but they are there, and they look appropriate, all printed on tampo printing, of course. Similar static ports and air data ports as we saw in the NG aircraft. And of course the little beluga whale eye in this section, looking good. Additionally, another angle that we didn't see on the NG aircraft, but reiterated here nicely, landing lights across the wing strut area, the wing root, that looks good. And then of course on this aircraft, our port engine with the engine fan detail looking nice. And you can also see the main landing gear just peeking out from behind the engine there. Out to the wing tip, that looks nice. Red strobe here on the port side of the JC Wings aircraft, that all looks good. There is a green strobe on the starboard wing, so that's fine. And then, of course, the trailing edge of the wing on the NG aircraft, the port wing. So very, very nice. Both of these airplanes, they sit well on their landing gear when everything is straight and level weight-wise. Obviously, the NG aircraft is never quite straight and level weight-wise, but it is not rolled at all on the ground laterally. So they are all just sitting on the ground quite nicely that way. Obviously, the JC Wings aircraft, though, is the most stable of the bunch. Really no deflection laterally and no deflection in terms of pitch when you do have the hatch installed there on the cargo hold. Taking the camera up freehand here, take a little bit of a closer look at some of the other details on both of these aircraft. First of all, yep, there it is. The cockpit window's coming out a little bit more nicely now. Obviously contrasting a little bit more with more direct lighting on them, and that all looks good. However, other more normal details you can see, nose tip there with the shut lines for the radar dome and all of that, so all that is still pretty much par for the course for airliners, but obviously a whole lot less cabin details here because there really is no cabin, at least not a passenger cabin. The only windows on the aircraft are the cockpit windows, and that's about it. So no entry-exit doors along the sides, no cabin windows or anything like that. However, we do still have an interior here that's actually accessible on the JC Wings version. So if we just pull this forward a wee bit, there we go. And now everything will pitch up. But now we can start to see inside the fuselage, and if we take a gander in there, you can see a whole bunch of nothing. So what does the cavity look like? It's empty. It is absolutely empty, and you can just see a little bit of overspray there from the paint shop, but that's about it. A little bit of a smudge there on the port side wall. That's just from the hatch going in and out, and some more scraping across the starboard side wall due to the same reason. However, there is a little bit of a decal applied in here just to show a semblance of a cargo floor, and obviously this is meant for you to display props inside. So eventually JC Wings are going to be coming out with A330 forward fuselage segments in 1/400 scale that you can purchase if you want and put inside the airplane, sort of stage them in there, and it would hide the big void. But for the moment, this is what mine looks like, and it is just a big void inside there with nothing really to see. But you can see the state of the metal in there, and it's all looking good. Integrity looks fine. So yeah, there's all of that, and I don't know. Perhaps we will get the little props there to take a look at that a little bit later on, perhaps as a little bit of a revision and addendum. When you do get the hatch in its open configuration installed, obviously you can see that we have got a tang and clevis arrangement here, which is quite difficult to arrange one-handed, but once it is in there, it sticks in, and you can see the overall disposition of all of that. So that looks fine. The armature there, it does not support anything. It's really just there for show. It just kind of flops around. All the support is done from the upper members there. But it's pretty good. It looks the part, and sometimes the nose will stay down with this installed, but other times it obviously does not. Even if we just barely put it in place, no, it does not bring the weight distribution quite far enough forward. Obviously this is a very light piece of plastic there, just a single injection molded piece there, but it does the part, and it completes the illusion there of having an opening hatch. And obviously you put the metal hatch back in for the closed configuration, and it sits right back down very nicely. So that's all fine. On the NG aircraft though, you can see, get a little bit of a closer look at that shut line. It is obviously exactly the same dimensions as the JC Wings version, and it would almost appear that you could just pull forward like you can on the other one and get this off. However, try as I might, I cannot. That is permanently bonded, and I didn't actually know when I got the NG model whether or not it would be removable, and I found out that indeed it is not removable. So there was that. They don't advertise it as being removable, so don't take them wrong, because they are telling you the truth. But yeah, JC Wings is so far the only one that I know of in 1/400 scale that has all of the pieces removable there. So that's well and good, and really fine by me. But there they are, the A330-743L, the Belugas. Interesting, and it's interesting to take a look at two aircraft that, well, they're identical, but two versions of the same aircraft by different manufacturers. I mean, other little details here on the JC Wings one that don't quite line up with the NG. For example, here are the three topside antennas across the top of the fuselage, and then you've got the two nav beacon lights there. On the NG version, you can see that all of that is still there, but the tampo printing is a bit of a higher quality up here by the beacon lights, as well as your antennas are a little bit smaller on the NG version, and I think they probably look a little bit more prototypically correct, if I have to be honest. However, when we get to the empennage, you can see that there is effectively no discernible difference between the two. The NG one obviously here, and then the JC Wings version here. The only difference being an aesthetic one with the livery. You see these two little lines that come down the little shark fin area off of the fuselage, and they are absent on the NG version. I don't know why that is. I don't know if perhaps these two models were done at a slightly different time and the aircraft had a slight livery change in that time, but that's what we've got here as basically the primary distinguishing factor between these two from a visual standpoint, and I don't know, it works. It works very nicely indeed. When I got these, I didn't intend to get two of the same airplane, but I got the NG one first, and I saw that it didn't have the removable fuselage hatch there, so I wanted the removable stuff. So I got the JC Wings version, and now we can take a look at two of these. So, interesting nonetheless. And now, just to close this out, I wanted to show these two from the underside and see that there is very little to distinguish these two from the underside, and really the only things that distinguish them are tactile things and not so much visual things. This is the NG aircraft, and I would argue that the tampo printing, the quality thereof, is generally better all around on the NG version. And of course you can see that we do have a lot of details on the underside. There are those ventral fins that we talked about earlier. And then Beluga XL on the bottom, a stand hole, and the nose landing gear doors there printed on all kinds of static ports and other things there. The main landing gear, just as is the case on many NG models in 1/400 scale, they do not pivot, but they do roll. Whereas on the JC Wings aircraft, they roll and they pivot. So a little bit of a distinguishing factor there. But otherwise, again, very similar quality of print work is visible here. Perhaps some of the sizes on some of these things and some of the relative colors are a little bit different on this as they are on the NG version. Here in the tail cone, the access hatches here for the auxiliary power unit, though very intricate here on the JC Wings version. On the NG version, you can see that it's much simplified, and I don't know which one is more representative of the actual aircraft. Here you can see that we have got these two red circles here. The NG aircraft here has some silver inlay in there. The JC Wings version just has some empty space inside those red circles, and again, I'm not entirely sure what they're for. Some sort of ground servicing equipment for sure. Underside the engine nacelles on the JC Wings version versus the NG version, and effectively they're identical. You're not going to see too much difference between those two. So you've got some similarities, some differences, some good points, some detracting points in both of these, and well, again, they are identical models of the identical aircraft right down there to the registration, plain as day. On both of these, they are identical through and through. So again, it depends on what you want. If you want to have the interactive capabilities of these, to have the removable hatches, see inside the cargo bay, obviously the JC Wings version is for you. If that doesn't particularly matter to you, go for the NG one. Tried and true, and it's really fine. It really just depends on what you want it for, and they're both great models in their own right. Just I think it depends on what you want from these models. I can't really say 100% that one is better than the other than to say that NG missed an opportunity that JC Wings exploited, but in so doing, I don't know, they add a little bit of intricacy, they make it harder to produce, they make it a little bit more expensive. So again, it's really in the eye of the beholder. They're both great. I recommend both of these quite highly. It's just a question of what you want at the end of the day. What are your needs? What do you want to do in terms of your display? And ultimately, what are you going to be doing with them? So, yeah, take all of this with a grain of salt. I prefer the JC Wings. You may prefer the NG. Is one a deal breaker? Nope. not in the least. So there they were, the NG and JC Wings renditions of the Airbus A330-743L Beluga XL in 1/400 scale. These two models, they are replicas of exactly the same airplane, as the tail numbers would belie, and, well, they're both very well executed models in 1/400 scale. What you get from both of these is a nice rendition of the A330-743L Beluga, and, well, they make very nice display pieces. When you look a little bit farther, though, you do start to see that perhaps NG were a little bit short-sighted in terms of what they decided to do with this particular model. The JC Wings version, quite obviously, with the removable forward hatch there in the cargo bay, it does add another dimension of detail, as well as another dimension of interactivity. The NG model doesn't do anything like that. It's just strictly a static piece, and it's very nicely done for what it is. However, this being a very unique airplane, and it is very unique because of that big cargo bay, if you've got the ability to look inside the cargo bay, even though there's absolutely nothing in there, at least not yet, there are some accessories on their way from JC Wings to complement this model, well, that's another layer of sophistication, that's another layer of desirability, in my opinion, in terms of which model should you get. But to answer the overall question of which model should you get, well, what do you want to do with it? Is it strictly going to be a static display someplace in the background, even if you've got an airport layout going on? If this airplane's not going to be featuring all that much in your layout and it's just there for scenery, well, the NG model's going to be just fine. It looks the part, and it certainly is very nicely put together, and that's in keeping with everything else that we have surveyed thus far from NG. However, if you do want to make this a focal point in terms of an airport diorama or whatever other sort of display options you have, well, then perhaps that JC Wings version with the openable payload bay is something to consider. Again, it just adds another layer of detail and interactivity and, again, desirability that I think the NG version just misses the mark on a little bit. However, beyond all of that, the other details that you're going to see on these two airplanes, well, effectively they are identical in every way. Yes, there are a few other smaller printed details that are absent on one and present on the other, but are they really going to make or break the overall presence or impression that one of these models makes? Not in the least, not in my opinion anyway. But there you are, JC Wings and NG both making a version of the A330-743L, and they're both doing a fine job of it. Again, the finer details are what distinguish these two models, and your decision in terms of which one to purchase, well, it's going to hinge entirely on that openable cargo bay section, in my opinion. However, they're both excellent, they both do exactly what they advertise, and they're both fine additions to any 1/400 scale die-cast model aircraft collection. Until next time, I do hope that you have enjoyed this one. Ferrari Matt 601 saying thank you very much for watching, and of course, we will see you soon.